I hear people saying all the time that buying a house in San Diego just doesn't make sense because it is way too expensive. And I have wanted to dive into this and see if it's actually true for a very long time. And I've wanted to make this video for a very long time, but I'm always nervous that I'm gonna like forget some key item that I should have been considering. Um, so I'm trying this. Please forgive me if I do forget something. I'm sure you guys will point it out to me. I apologize for the video quality. I am using my computer camera and I'm on Zoom to record this because I did all the math in an Excel spreadsheet because that's how I roll. Let's dive into this and see if we can come to a conclusion as to what makes the most sense. Should we be buying a house or should we keep renting? So, this is my lovely Excel spreadsheet. And what I did was I started with rent. So, my assumption here is you're renting a two-bedroom apartment, looked around. This seems to be around 3,500. I'm sure people are going to comment and be like, I'm paying way more than that, or I'm paying way less. Uh-huh. This is an average. This is like in general, you can probably find an apartment for around $3,500 in San Diego that's two bedrooms somewhere. Okay. Even where I live, which is like kind of stupid high expensive, this is possible. For 1 year, that cost is going to be 3,500 times 12, which is $42,000. Each year, what I did was assumed that rent, would increase by 8%. Now, with the way inflation has been, it's been 10%. Every year, landlords could raise the rent 10% in San Diego because it's like 5% plus the inflation rate capped out at 10%. So right now, in theory, the max should be somewhere in the 7 to 8% range. So I just assumed 8%. It might be less, it might be more, but I think most landlords like to max it out as much as possible. So we have an 8% increase every year. You can see it goes up really fast and costs more and more and more and more. So this is after 5 years, your total cost is going to be $246,397 that you have spent on rent and given to a landlord. And all you have to show for it is that you had somewhere to live. Let's now assume we are going to buy a place. And I'm assuming that you can buy a two-bedroom condo somewhere. Again, you may not get to live in the same place that you live now, like the same neighborhood. You may have to go somewhere else, but it is possible to buy a two-bedroom condo for $650,000 in decent areas that like shouldn't be super objectionable to people, and it would be a nice condo. I mean, when I looked at this, it was like we could actually get a fixed up condo in some places. Very nice. Like, just this is just an example. Okay. Let's not get wrapped around the axle on this. When you see the numbers, it will matter. All right. Then I assume that every year the price goes up by 4% because 4% is the average appreciation on a home over the past like 50 or 100 years or something like that. So we're just going to go, and over the past 5 years, it's been way, way, way higher than that. So this is just a conservative estimate of a 4% increase per year. What that does is right now that's keeping ahead of inflation, which is fantastic. When inflation was much higher, that would not keep ahead of inflation. But that's what we're assuming. So you can see the value of the home is going up each year. All right. I'm going to assume that right now, when you buy, your interest rate is 6.5%. It may actually be higher right now, but this is, again, just an example. And it's going to hopefully go down in the next couple of years. So I'm showing that we refinance in year 3 and get it down to 5.5%. That might be ambitious. It may or may not happen. It's more of an example for you that your payment is going to stay the same every year unless you do something like refinance. Otherwise, it stays the same. Because we're in a condo, we are going to have an HOA fee. I'm assuming it's $300 a month. It could be more, it could be less, depends on the condo that you're buying in. This, again, just an example. We're going to do a 5% down payment, which is $32,500. Okay. Because this is 5%, you are likely going to have to pay PMI. PMI, I'm estimating at $391 a month. And I know, oh my God, that sounds horrible. Why would you pay that? Well, because otherwise I have to pay 4 times this and I don't have that and I want to buy a house. I'm going to pay this for now because once my equity goes up and I get over that 20% threshold, I can get rid of this. Okay. But this is going to allow me to get into a home now. You know, a lot of people are against paying this. Just wait. Let's see what the numbers say. See if it makes sense. And by the way, this is around, I think, 0.65%. PMI rates can vary from like 0.5% to 2%. It depends on how much you're putting down, your credit, like a billion different factors, and only your lender can tell you what this is going to be. So again, this is an estimate. I'm just using an example. I actually got the number off of Zillow, which I don't always like Zillow, but they came in handy on this one. Taxes. This actually assumes a 1.2% tax rate, which is actually kind of high. It's usually closer to 1.1, but I just wanted to be conservative here. So we're saying it's $7,800 a year, and we'll break that down into a monthly payment. Insurance, honestly, I just guessed on this one. In the example that I had done on Zillow, they estimated like $945. I figured in San Diego it's going to be higher, so I just made it higher. I don't know. So this could vary by a couple $100 either way. Based on all of this, your monthly payment is going to be $4,945 until you refinance, at which point it's going to drop by $400. So you can see like the drop in the interest rate, like that's amazing. You're actually saving money here. You have a lower payment, so you're going to have more disposable income. However, up here, it's gone up $500. So we like this if this actually happens. We're assuming it does. Even if it doesn't, the numbers, you'll see, they're still okay. Based on this, our yearly cost on all of these, I just take the monthly payment times 12, we get the yearly cost, okay? Because you own the place, there may be repairs you have to do. This is a condo, so chances are your repairs are not going to be really that big, but you should be like budgeting for replacing a hot water heater, replacing air conditioning. Those things can be more expensive. So I'm putting in $1,000 a month or $1,000 a year as the repair costs for this condo. If you actually put it away, and you have to replace a hot water heater, you'll have money sitting there. If you have to replace your HVAC, you'll already have some money available. Based on this, your total costs are going to be the first year, $60,340. After you refinance, it goes down to $55,576,000. And the total cost over 5 years is $287,000. And that is $40,000 more than renting, right? So why the hell would you buy? Renting's obviously cheaper. You don't have to worry about the stress of like owning. You don't have to deal with any of that crap. So you're going to keep renting, right? Hold on. You haven't taken into account the fact that you are earning equity on this condo. So we're going to take equity into account. And the first year you don't have anything here, but after that year is up, then you'll have 26,000 in equity the first year. You'll have 27 the next year, 28 the year after that, and it keeps going up. If you add all these together, you're going to get a number. And I actually added $42,000 more to this because every month this payment includes around $600 that you are putting towards paying down the principal on your loan, which is an increase in equity. It's a forced savings account, essentially. Based on that, you're going to get $152,408 in equity over 5 years. What that means is that your net cost, you're going to take this and subtract from this, and you're going to get $177,000 is the cost to own over 5 years, as opposed to the cost to rent, which is $246,397. The difference between renting and buying with that number is basically $70,000. It costs $70,000 less to buy than it does to rent. So I don't know. That kind of makes me think it might be worth it to buy. But, there are going to be people who don't want to have the stress of owning, or they're taking into account the fact that they had to come up with $32,000 from the get-go and they don't like that cost. Or some people just don't want to buy, or it's just not the right time, or you don't know if you're going to stay put for 5 years. Very important. That's all fine. But if you go down this route, where the real money comes in is when you get later on. Each year, this improves and improves. So if you go for 10 years, your net cost of owning is only $215,000 versus $585,000 in rent. You're going to pay $585,000 in rent, and you're going to have nothing to show for it other than having a place to live. That is basically $370,000 more to rent over 10 years than it is to buy. And the kicker here is, in order to have gained this much equity or this much equity over that same time period, if you had just saved the money instead of earning the equity, you would have to have saved $2,500 a month in order to get this much equity over 5 years, or almost $3,000 a month to get this much equity over 10 years. I don't know a lot of people who save that much in a month. This is where becoming a homeowner creates wealth. This is why when you see those statistics that show that renters have $4,000 in net worth and homeowners have an average of $350,000 in net worth, this is why. They're creating wealth through real estate. This payment and this payment are drastically different. If you cannot afford this payment, this whole discussion is moot. Okay? It doesn't matter. If you can't afford this, if you can only afford this, keep renting. You're fine. You have a place to live. That's the most important thing. But if you can afford this, and some of affording this may also be taking into account tax savings that I did not even discuss because they're too complex to put on a spreadsheet, buying is well worth it. That's a lot of money right there. And then what people do is they take this money and they go buy another house. And then they have 2 houses, or they buy a bigger house because their family has grown and they need more space. Or they use this money to pay for college for their kids. Or they use this money to help pay medical bills. Or they use this money to redo their house. This money is your money. You can borrow this money from the bank and use this money. This isn't just funny money. This is real, honest to good wealth that you are creating. And this is what rich people do. Super rich people who have stock, for example, the same thing. Stock is equity. That's all it is. And they borrow against that equity to go buy other things, to go do other things. And that's how they afford the yachts and the whatever. They take this money and they go buy the things they want to buy. And instead of having to have this cash on hand and having to have saved this much money a month, which they could not have done, they borrow this at whatever the prevailing interest rate is. And it costs them a lot less than having to have this much money on hand. Does that make sense? I hope this makes sense. So this was, honestly, I wanted to do this for me because I wanted to see the numbers. I get it. Prices are high. San Diego's not a cheap place to live. I think it's 1,000% worth paying for because it's San Diego and it's awesome and amazing. And even on days like today that are super June gloomy and I can't stand it, it's still worth it to live here because it's still an amazing place to live. But it's expensive, and that has to be taken into consideration. But if you are wondering if you should rent or buy, if you can buy something that you actually like in a place, in an area that you are actually happy with, go for it. It makes a ton of sense. That being said, I really highly do not recommend buying if you are not going to be happy where you live, coming home to a home you do not like or a neighborhood you do not like sucks, and it's not worth it. It's not worth the money. If you cannot afford something that you can handle, don't do it. If, however, you are willing to maybe live in a different neighborhood than you ultimately want to for a while to build up this equity and then move into that neighborhood later, if that's worth it for you, do that. If you are, maybe willing to buy that 2-bedroom condo instead of that 3-bedroom house and live in that for a while, because otherwise you would have been renting a 2-bedroom apartment anyway. So that's fine. You're basically just living in the same place, except that you own it. Do that. You don't have to buy a house just because you're buying. Buy what you can, and then you can use this equity over time to move into something better. Okay, I know there's somebody out there who's going to be like, okay, Allison, but that's for 650,000. What happens if you need to buy like $1 million home? That doesn't make sense. That's way too high. And there's absolutely no way that that makes any sense. And renting would make more sense. Hold, please. I ran all the same numbers for $1 million. And here's where we got. After 5 years, we have 233,000, basically $234,000 in equity. And you have a cost of 317,000 versus 206. So it is $110,000 more expensive to rent than to buy. By the way, I assumed $1 million house. This is probably going to be in like a La Mesa or something like that. It's, 3-bedroom house. The rent, I increased that also. Everything else is pretty much the same, higher taxes, higher PMI, higher down payment. Insurance, I have no idea. I just made that up and went high, I hope, just to be conservative. Repair costs, I put a lot higher. Put $5,000 a year. I don't know if they're going to be that high, but again, you should be setting stuff aside so that you can replace the roof when you need to and stuff like that. Do you need to set aside this much? Maybe not, but I wanted to be conservative. And by the way, I added the $64,000 for the principal paid down. But in order to save this much over time, you would have had to be saving nearly $4,000 a month on top of your rent payment. By the way, monthly payment, $6,600. By year 5, you're almost equal. But remember, this monthly payment stays the same. After 10 years, it is $424,000 cheaper to buy than to rent. And you would have had to be saving almost $4,600 a month. So even as you get higher, it still makes sense to buy. Again, only if you can afford the payment. If you can't, again, this whole thing is moot. Maybe you can buy something less expensive, a condo or something like that, but it doesn't matter if you can't afford the payment. You can't afford the payment, you keep renting, and it's fine. It's just life. Some people have to rent, some people can buy. I hope this is helpful. Let me know what questions you have. Point out what I screwed up. I'm sure there's something. Did the best I could. I looked at this 50,000 times, but of course, as I'm looking at it, I'm sure I'm like missing things. So anyway, that's that. I hope it's helpful. And if you have any questions about if your specific situation, if you should buy or if you should keep renting, let me know. I just had a friend reach out to me and ask me these same questions. And in her situation, it probably makes sense to consider to continue renting until her kids are out of school. And then buy something at that point, because then she doesn't have to buy as big of a thing and it wouldn't be as expensive and she could actually get something she wants as opposed to being super stressed out about a payment and blah, blah, blah. I'm never going to tell you to buy just for the sake of, hey, I want you to, work with me and I want to make some money off of you. You need to do what's best for you in your situation, and buying at any point is only the right decision if it's the right decision for you. Let me know what questions you have. Let me know how I can help.